Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back once again for more discussions on some TNA wrestling shenanigans. Today, I want to talk about a female heel faction, much like in the vein of the main event Mafia, um, Aces and Eights, maybe ish, um, or perhaps even the system. I feel like I can't even ever remember, um, the girls really getting many factions. Like you could call the beautiful people a faction because it was more than two members. Um, I guess now the elegance brand sort of thing is a faction since they're kind of they already had kind of three-ish members. If you count the concierge, the manager there. Um, though again, I don't know whether you would or whether you wouldn't, but now they're adding Maggie Lee there to the group, so that now does make them a proper, faction and whatnot. I don't even think we've seen very many women's factions like in TNA. I know that there's quite a few in WWE, but realistically, I don't really think that a lot of those factions feel like they're doing anything, if you know what I mean. You're looking at, just these. It's trios. It's a lot of trios. Um, Usually, it's a tag team, and then like someone who might sub in for the tag team, and someone who's kind of a single star, and it's kind of like, well, we don't have really a whole lot for you to do, so we're just gonna slap you in this group, and then we're gonna give you all TV time together because we don't have enough time to feature everyone, and that is one of those things. Like that's kind of why the tag teams, like at least the female tag teams right now, work out, is because it's like, well, we don't know what else to kind of do with you, and we want to feature as many people as possible. So, but yeah, no, like it is a tough situation sometimes, um, but you know, it's one of those things. But at least anyway, I do feel like, like I said, if you had, they had Mickey James there before. Um, I don't know. I like she might have to play the role of Sting, kind of in this scenario if we're comparing it to the main event Mafia, kind of thing. I obviously can't call it the main event Mafia. Um, I don't know what you would call it, but like you could like do a version of the Four Horsemen kind of thing. Actually, I think that would be kind of cool too. But I kind of think like the main event Mafia was such a really good kind of you know angle because it's a natural kind of angle where it's like you know you get these older guys that are kind of or girls, whatever, that are kind of threatened by the younger stars. They kind of feel disrespected by the younger stars or whatever, and it's like, well, and yet, new versus old, and, the young guys are scratching and clawing and trying to, you know, find their way and establish themselves and all of that sort of stuff. So it's one of those things where I think it's a great story and it just sort of leads to sort of great, storytelling, sort of thing. So, and you can build so many young stars with that sort of heel group, kind of working there, and kind of, you know, some people having matches and finally proving themselves, and then sort of finally somehow winning the title or whatever else it is. So that's one of those things that I think is always useful. It's always sort of a great sort of angle. But like, as I said, I don't really think they've ever done it, and I don't know whether it maybe has happened in Japan, this sort of thing. But I don't really know. Like, I don't think this sort of thing has ever happened on a major stage. Um, where you get to see, a group of people trying to keep, effectively keep the younger talent out of the main event scene, sort of thing, and, trying to hold on to their spots, at least in storyline or whatever else it is. And the young, wrestlers trying to prove themselves and trying to obtain those spots and whatnot. So I just think it's one of the best ideas that's, it's like a logical idea, it's one of the best ideas that ever came together, and I think that if you're not going to try to, do similar things or try to, use parts of that sort of storyline, of course you don't have to just have saying, I don't know how many people was in the main event Mafia, 5 or 6, I can't remember. You could have it to 3 people if you really wanted. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be tough though in some ways, because you've got to the people that you've got to try to put in a faction like that have kind of got to make sense, if you know what I mean. You can't just put somebody who's too self-obsessed, kind of thing, like Angelina Love or whatever else, in a group like that, because, like, you can try to do it, but it's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got to have somebody or people that are in that group that, know they've got to work together and work for the, benefit of the group, or the benefit of, what the group is kind of going for, or, the collective good, or whatever else it is. You could have somebody in there that's like, no, this is about me and whatnot, in a sense, or whatever else it is as well. But at the end of the day, they've got to compromise, or whatever else it is, sometimes, and say, oh no, yes, this is, all right, I'll do it, but begrudgingly type thing all the way through. And that can also be like, the other way around, with the person who is, I don't know, not the baby face, but more of a baby face, like Sting, where they're not really like, doing the heel stuff. They're not really cheating or whatever else it is. They're not really involved in all that. And they're more just involved in saying, I want respect and I want to prove that I am the best, and all of this sort of stuff, and kind of trying to do the right thing, ish. I don't know. But yeah, I just think it's a cool idea. I think it wouldn't be innovative in some ways, just because you're going to do it with the gals. Yeah, it's something that's been done before. It's something that, probably will have to be done again, like, it's one of those things. It's just a sort of, thing that you kind of have to do with gals or guys or whoever, is say, hey, the legends want respect, or the top guys want respect, and they kind of don't want to lose their spot, or at least in storyline, they don't want to lose their spot, so to speak. They want to remain the face of the company. And actually, that's kind of like John Cena's current story. Like, he wants the respect, he wants to remain the top guy, or, he feels like he is the top guy. It's like very much Hulk Hogan in like late 90s kind of vibes, like where he's trying and trying and trying to hold on to that position that he, really doesn't really need to, and it's kind of time to move on, or kind of time to slow down, and time to, think about hanging up the boots, or sort of that sort of thing. Like, and it, it's been that way for a while with Cena, but it was that way for a while with Hogan. It's that way for a while with a lot of wrestlers, but I think it is ultimately up to the wrestlers, but it is something that should also be inherent within, like, and it is always one of those things that I saw this as well with the WWE releases, where the girls were getting released, or the gals, whatever, were getting released like 10 years before the guys. Like, they were getting released in their mid-30s, while the guys were getting released in their mid-40s, like, for saying that they were too old or whatever else it was. Which is a lot of bullshit. Like, obviously, like, there is a certain point where it's like, like Mickie James right now, I feel like she's basically hanged up the boots. Maybe she hasn't really, and maybe she's got a couple, big matches left in her, but it feels like she's basically said, yeah, I'm getting too old for this. And same with Trish, and same with Lita. It's like, they only sort of come out, now and then for a few things and whatnot. So, same with kind of Nikki Bella and a few other people, but, or Brie Bella, I don't know which one's which, I always get confused. But again, like, if you're saying, this person, that person, who would be in the faction, I don't know that there's that many people that are kind of like, it would make sense, like, right now, for in TNA at least, if you were to say who would be in this faction and who would make sense. Yeah, like, before you would have to say it was like Mickie James, perhaps in the role of Sting. I don't know, who else did they have? They kind of had Diana. You could put Diana in there, as like the focal point, Kurt Angle kind of character, I guess. That can make sense because she was feuding with Mickie, kind of thing, and whatnot. So you could continue, like, that feud is kind of the boiling point under which, like, I was leading this faction, I was the new blood, and blah 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 blah, and all of this, and I was the the standard bearer of this division and whatnot, and now you're trying to take that away from me, or whatever else it is, just to finish off your legacy, or whatever else it is, all this sort of stuff. So it's like, you could have that tension there. That kind of makes sense. Like, there's only a few key characters kind of in storylines like this. The rest of the characters, you can only have maybe one kind of person that's kind of like the peacemaker and saying, come on, guys, or gals, we've just got to get, our business done. We all agree that we've got to, hold accountable these young wrestlers and whatnot, and all of that sort of stuff. That's our uniting, kind of doctrine or mantra or whatever else it is, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to, show these kids that they're not just gonna, get to the top by just, winning a few matches, or just, whatever. And that is one of those things. It's like, gaining that over time, those feuds over time. Like, again, that's always one of those things that's saying, now I'm on par, or I'm challenging, somebody that's like Eddie Edwards, or whatever. Now I'm on par with, I don't know, the one person that they kind of said, hey, Samoa Joe, come into our faction, you're a great young wrestler, and, we want to see great things from you, or whatever else it is, you know, or like the Randy Orton of the group, you know, we feel like this young kid is actually doing the things the way, they're meant to be, but like they're trying to teach him, or they're trying to basically stooge him out, or bag boy him out, or whatever else it is, and they're treating him poorly and all of this sort of stuff. But they're like, oh yeah, this is the way it used to be, kid. I used to do this for Harley Race, or who, whatever, or I used to do this for X, Y, and Z, or who, whatever. And they might be like, yeah, but I've already done this stuff. I've already been doing this stuff, and they're like, yeah, that's how it goes, and whatnot, that sort of thing. And then you finally have them sort of break apart, or whatever else it is, because of the animosity, or, lack of opportunity, and whatnot, and them just being like dickheads. And, finally realizing, hey, the young guys might be right, you got to fight for yourself. You can't just, like if the numbers game is too many, perhaps you do need to team up with some other people. But at the end of the day, it is an individualistic sport, like type thing, like that is the problem with tag team wrestling. I often find, unless you're a really established tag team, there's always that glory that you could have as a single star, type thing. But it is tough because, again, if you say, how successful am I going to be as a single star? Well, if I've been a really successful tag team guy, it's like it's going to be even harder to break into the singles realm unless I sort of, go somewhere else or change drastically. Because people are always going to be like, where's, Jeff? Where's Matt? Where's Devon? Where's Bubba, or whoever? Where's Christian? Where's Edge? Like to whoever it is, to the person that's the other part of the tag team type thing. So it's really tough for people to be really successful as a tag team and then sort of go along. It has happened before, but it is like one of those things that's weird kind of thing. But yeah, you're going to be more successful, like if you're a tag team wrestler, staying at being a tag team wrestler. But it can be tough because it's like somebody, fell out, or somebody, went and got arrested, or something else, or, like you do want to try to chase that, being the face of the company, or trying to be one of the top guys, or whatever, or gals, or whatever. So again, I get the whole thing, but it's just like, again, if you're like trying to book a faction like this, like, again, it's tough to keep it kind of together and kind of keep that going. It doesn't have a long shelf life. It doesn't have, and that's the funny thing about like the system. It's like it's been going for quite a while, like 2 years kind of now, or a year and a bit, almost 2 years. Actually coming up on 2 years next year, isn't it? I think they started in 24. Yeah, so it's been going for a year and a half, or thereabouts, or whatever it is. Almost a year and a half. So, yeah, but whatever. So, like, that's a fairly long time for a faction. Like, they never really concluded the NWO kind of story. I don't really think they concluded the main event Mafia story really well. But that's because, like, Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff came in and they wanted to change everything, and they wanted to do their own angles and whatnot. So it was kind of like there was a lot of things that were in motion or that were in place, and it was like, what are we going to do? We've got to change everything. We don't think this is working, or we don't think that's working. So we've got to try to do something. We've got to do more. Like, and again, that is a good idea to say, hey, how do we get as many people as possible, how do we not monopolize, but how do we like regain like the level of, like what WCW was like, because that's kind of like what we feel like we need. We need another WCW, you know, where you know, it's a really major thing and it is really good, like close second to WWE. You know, it's a true, sort of competition alternative to WWE. You know, and just closing that gap. So, but I do think TNA was like on that path, and but just bringing in every ex WWE guy that you could, wasn't the answer. Um, you know, and even saying, oh, let's not bring in too many ex WWE guys or whatever it is. Just the same thing, just bringing in too many big name talent or big contract talent, you know, especially without having, a plan for them, or without having significant things for them to do. If you're going to say, oh, we're just going to bring them in and then we don't know what we're going to do, that's no good. Like, even if you say, oh, well, we don't know what we're going to do with them, but obviously we've got to put them in a prominent position and we've got to give them good storylines and we've got to try to elevate some of these young guys, or gals, whatever, again, so that, in 2 years or 3 years or whatever else it is, when this person does say, look, I'm going back to WWE, or I've got an offer at WWE or whatever, I can't turn it down, or hey, I'm actually going to retire next year or whatever else it is. Um, like, and it's tough. Like, Dixie was there with Sting for many years saying, oh, another year, another year. And was that the best? I don't know. Like, but now he's, said, hey, no, that's it. But yeah, I do think that there is kind of, that sort of space for this kind of group, and it would be a great thing to try to do, like bringing in somebody or bringing in a few people, even from, New Japan or Stardom or whatever, you know, or WWE. Again, like, you could bring in anyone that you think will fit, um, or that thinks, hey, I can make something there and make that work and help, bring along some of the new stars and whatnot. But I also kind of want one last, good hurrah, because I'm trying to, hang up the boots and whatnot and that sort of thing. So, you know, that's where I'm at, you know. Or at least, like, I'm trying to hang up the boots from, full time, or like even mostly full time sort of wrestling. Like, maybe I'll wrestle at WrestleMania, or maybe I'll wrestle, at the, make an appearance at the Royal Rumble or that sort of thing, like, and then have a storyline going into Mania or something like that, or whatnot, whatever else it is. That's a great, that's always a great storyline builder. Yeah, and I keep thinking that TNA should have a very similar sort of thing, because it's just a great storyline builder, and it always sort of would make, building the storylines of saying, hey, we have this leading into either Slammiversary or Bound for Glory or whatever else, or some sort of, number one contendership happening at the pay-per-view, at Victory Road, or at, the show before, so that you can, or the pay-per-view before, so that you can set this up and say, okay, now we've got a 1 month build, or now we've got, a build for a couple months or whatever else it is. We'll put them in another match between now and, whatever show, if it's Victory Road, it's probably not going to be that. But, if you did it for Slammiversary, you could say, let's do it under siege or whatever else it is, and then let's have them have a tag match, or let's have them have some sort of other match, at the next show against all odds. So, but yeah, no, I think that it's a cool idea. I don't know whether they'll implement it, but it is a cool idea, at least in my opinion. Um, and like just to see, like who would be on the main event Mafia side faction, and then like again seeing who would be sort of like the contenders or the challengers or whatever else it is. You know, that would be kind of cool and whatnot. So yeah, I think it only is a positive thing to try to do. I understand people will say, "Oh, yeah, you're just copying your old storyline," but the end of the day, it's like, well, that it was successful, you know. So obviously, and like wrestling has copied just about every other storyline that has ever existed, you know. And somebody says, "Oh, well, it's an exact copy." Well, no, it's not an exact copy. That's just the way kind of these factions go. Like if you've got this faction of, main event level guys or gals that are trying to protect their spot and trying not to, let the young talent in, you know, but that's a natural kind of thing that, has happened for centuries really. It doesn't really happen that much anymore, but people are still like, they've got to earn it. They've got to go out there and prove it. They've got to go out there and, you know, do the hard yards. They've got to be professional. They've got to do this. They've got to do that, even if they think, I'm too cool for school or whatever else it is, you know. And you've got to give proper interviews. You can't just be like skibbity toilet or whatever else, like or whatnot, making fun of the absurd things or whatnot. But yeah, guys, those are my thoughts. So and I know you guys probably get it. So I'm just sort of doing this for the people that are going, oh yeah, that actually does sound good, or I didn't really think of it, or whatever, like type thing, or I haven't really thought through this or whatnot. But yeah, that does make sense or whatever. It's a natural angle kind of thing. But yeah, guys, anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys will join me again in another one.